And start by opening up the pot again. When you're doing this opening, just like in centering, you want the clay to be slippery wet. And if it starts to get dry and grab at your hands, you simply have to let go and relubricate. Now, here's the first thing in collaring. As soon as you open it up like this, you want to decide how much clay at the top you're reserving for collaring. And then you're going to go over this clay and closing and squeezing, kind of the fundamental concept for all kinds of things in making pots. Probably not entirely limited to making pots. And closing and squeezing and feeling for any residual irregularity. You're trying to get this clay to forget everything it's ever experienced, except for going around and around on a wheel while it's being squeezed. And to achieve perfect results there isn't humanly possible, but that's what you're doing. That's where real success in collaring starts. Then you proceed, just like making a pot, making a cylinder to collar on top of for this demo. But when you get to that clay that you've worked on, you just leave it alone. You might go over it slightly, just kind of caressing it, trying to make sure it feels happy. But leave it alone while you throw the rest of the pot. By the time you're ready to collar, the clay that you've reserved for collaring is going to be thicker, not dramatically, but it's going to be thicker than the clay directly below it. Let's see, I think we'll do one more finger pull here. Oh, didn't get that. Getting your clay evenly lubricated. And I don't like to say wet, because wet is accurate, but the main thing is you're not trying to get your clay wet, you're trying to make it slippery. I went a little thin right there. As I say, I don't figure a demo has to be perfect. You get to be a good thrower. You can make all kinds of mistakes, and very few of them aren't fixable. That one, I had gotten the clay thinner here than it was directly above there. And whenever you do that, the basic cardinal rule is you don't try to pull through it. Go to that spot and try to take that wall thickness up the rest of the way. I really haven't done a perfect job on this wall. Anyway, we'll switch to the rub. What you're going to do is you're going to entirely build the lower section of your pot to where it's finished. And again, you can see I haven't built a perfect wall here. But perfect is something that does not actually exist in reality. Final exercise is a swollen form with a collared top. Right now this pot is entirely, the base of the pot is entirely thrown. I'm just shaping it up, making it nice and strong. Okay, when you've gotten to this point, what you're going to do is the roughly the same thing you did at the beginning after opening. You're going to work on this clay. You got to get it wet, very much like you did right after you opened it up. More time. Anyway, the clay kind of sets up a little bit. Kind of forgets how to move. You got to kind of wake it up. When you feel the clay start to move, especially thin a little bit, then you know it's ready to color. Okay, first of all, the clay that you're working on has to be kept wet. Remember, I talk about trying to get the clay to forget everything that's ever happened to it, other than spinning around on your wheel with you squeezing it. The reason for that is pretty simple. The same as what I said about if after you've centered and opened a ball of clay and are pulling the wall and the lip comes up uneven, it's not because there's anything wrong with your pull, because you didn't do a good job centering and or opening. Now the shape that you're going to maintain as you're building the top of your pot here is a dome, transitioning nicely into the neck. You're going to keep the dome dry. It's where this these metal ribs are extraordinarily good. And you're going to not have any sudden change of direction in the shape of your wall. And then what I mean by that is you'll see that excuse me, like right here, right there, there is a potential problem, because my dome should be continuous from here to here. Well, I know that, so I fixed that up. You don't want any changes of direction in the shape of your wall that pose any unusual stress on the pot. You're going to use a dome for building the wall. Let's see, I should demonstrate a couple of things here. The reason this lip came up so nice and even is because I did a real good job working out your irregularities. And let's see, I didn't bring myself a needle tool. I'll have students ask me, well, what happens if it doesn't come up nice and even? And usually I take a needle tool and cut a chunk out of the lip and I say, well, alright, now does this qualify as an uneven lip? And they go, well, yeah. I say, well, you just fix it. The old enclosing and squeezing thing. You gotta be gentle, but all these things can be worked out. You're not supposed to put up with these problems, you're supposed to fix them. Of course, your hands have to develop a certain skill level to be able to do that. And you see, the stress of working on this is causing this to deform. That's totally normal. And you fix that up and go back to working on fixing the lip up. I'm not going to try to return this lip to being perfect. Perfect, again, being something that doesn't actually exist in the real world. I think it should be evident that taking a nice chunk out of the lip like that, that in fairly short order you can fix it back up to something that's perfectly acceptable. Now the thing is, I said you use a dome for building the top of the pot because the dome is the shape that stands up to the stress you're putting on it. If a dome isn't the shape that you want it to be when you're done, that's okay, you can modify it afterwards. There's limits to the kind of modification you can do, but I'll demonstrate a little bit. One of the things you can always do with a dome, and again, you want to keep it dry, and a dry finger works real well for this. You can always bring a dome down. Bring this dome down a little bit. And if you've ever had the shoulder of a pot collapse while you were collaring, I'm going to do my best to convince you that that's not something you have to put up with. Let's keep taking this down. Got some deformation there from the stress I put it through fixing up that cutout lip. And see, we'll take this down until, by golly, it's like flat across the top and it's not collapsing. That's because there's a well-structured dome. Let's just drop it right down inside. The purpose of that demo is to show you that if you have done a good job building a dome, collaring your pot, you can collapse it, bring it back up again, and it's still strong enough for you to keep working on. It's typical to force the dome is causing the wall a little bit to spread here. And that's something you want to, if you're looking for a perfect cylinder, you just have to pay attention to that stuff. Alright, we'll cut this in half. And here you can see the dome was not strong from being thick. Okay? The dome was strong from being properly constructed and properly organized. And that's the collaring thing.